Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, where faith, community, and ministry intersect in the unique context of smaller congregations. I'm your host, Tony Marr, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two men who are convinced they're a little bit more talented than I am.
That is right. I'm Robert Kill, one of those supposedly more talented guys, co-host and fellow small church leader. Together, we're here to explore the challenges, triumphs, and inspiring stories within the tight-knit communities that make up our smaller churches.
And I'm Bruce Montgomery, the one here to bring even more to the table than these two and offer a unique perspective to our conversation.
So whether you believe this talent hierarchy or not, you're in for a treat. If you're a pastor, a church member, or just curious about the world of leadership, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we dive into topics that matter to you, from innovative ministry ideas to navigating the unique dynamics of a smaller congregation.
So grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's journey together through the wonderful tapestry of small church life.
This is the Small Church Podcast.
Gentlemen, today is an exciting day. Today is our 52nd episode of the Small Church Podcast.
Woo!
1 year. 1 year ago today, we put out our first episode, and we have been on the stratosphere, the potosphere, I'm not sure what it would be called, the spotosphere, for 52 consecutive weeks. 52 weeks, gentlemen, that we have been doing this show, and today is our anniversary. So we wanted to do something a little bit different today. This will be for our listeners that have been with us for all 52 weeks, or whether or not this is your first time. We want to say thank you. We're going to do something a little bit different today, and we're just going to take some time to celebrate 1 year of the Small Church Podcast, share some of our favorite moments, some memories, some things that we've learned, and say thank you to all of you. So, Bruce, it has been 1 year since we sat down, put these headphones on, hooked up these microphones, and started talking about small church leadership, and what a year it's been. We've seen several changes in life, in the show over the course of the last year, and man, it's been a fun ride.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting the echo. I never imagined how much fun it would be and how successful we'd be.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to see. I want to share really quickly. Robert's dying over here.
All I could picture was that episode in that scene in Major League when Bob Uecker is like, "So what do you got there?" And he just kind of nods like, "Not the best color man for no reason at all, right there." And I was like, Bruce is like, "Yep," and I'm like. Strong silent type. That's what we needed right there from Bruce.
That's right. Robert, you first joined the show as a guest, and I think it was like episode 6, episode 7, something like that.
Yeah, pretty early on.
You jumped on, and we've had like 35, I think, different guests, 30 different guests, something like that, over the course of the last year, and you're the only one that we invited to become a permanent part of the show.
I think there's only one local enough to really do this weekly.
That is not true. We had several local people there.
You did a tremendous job.
You're the only one who got the invite back. Did you know that when you sat down with us for the episode on bivocational ministry that you were really auditioning for a co-host job?
And that I would no longer be bivocational a year later. So,
right.
No, I didn't. And it's been a really fun journey. And I know that, there's just so much that goes on in the life of a church, whether it is a church of 20 people or a church of 20,000 people. There's so much that goes on, and I love getting to just talk about that because it helps me in the church I'm in, and I think it hopefully is providing some at least thoughts and ideas. Like I think back to some of the episodes which we'll talk about here in a minute, and just I maybe didn't fully align with where they are. I don't maybe fully understand everything, but it inspired me and challenged me to take some real steps in how I can lead ministry better and things like that. So
yeah, that's great. I think in preparing for this episode, I went looking and writing the outline for it and putting together the questions that I wanted to ask you guys and have us discuss. And I was thinking, it feels like we just did this because we did an end-of-year recap at the end of December. But then I was thinking, that was 4 months ago. And I went looking back through our show catalog and seeing all the different guests that we've had over the last 4 months, all the different things that we've talked about over the last 4 months. And I think that it will be good to kind of ask some of these questions that we asked back then, but also to reflect on the last year as a whole, the whole journey and what it's been. Some crazy things that have happened through the technical side of things with the podcast, some things that have changed with our hosting and how Anchor no longer exists, Spotify, some technical things that it's now Riverside, bought out by another company, and the way they changed a lot of the way that they do things, that now I only get the numbers for listeners through Spotify. And over the last year through Spotify, we have had over 2,600 unique listeners to our show.
That's awesome.
That's just through Spotify. Now, that's not saying that they all listen every week and everything, but we've had over 2,600 different unique listeners to our show over the last year, just on Spotify. And back when they gave these kind of stats, Spotify made up about 30% of our listenership. The greatest platform that we were having listeners through was Apple Podcasts.
That's what my wife and I listened to it through.
And so I think that it's pretty safe to say that our show has reached over, I think easily we could say over 4,000 or 5,000 people over the course of the last year, which, Bruce, for you and I starting out our first couple of weeks when it was pretty much our spouses, and I don't even know that Carol ever listened to an episode, so maybe just my wife listening to this thing, to think that we have had several thousand people that have become a part of the Small Church Podcast family over the last year is very humbling, and at the same time, I think something really worth celebrating.
It is, and it shows how much we need Robert. We started out small, and now he's made us.
Yeah, I agree, Robert.
I'm 6'4". I'm just tall. I make the Small Church Podcast taller.
Make us taller.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So, guys, let's jump right into some of this discussion here. Thinking back over the last year, what has been some of your highlights for you? What's been a favorite episode, maybe a favorite guest, and why?
For me, I'm always going to have, and I think you will too, Tony, a special place in my heart for Jamin. What he did in talking about singles ministry, and he's at a pretty large church, but man, he scaled that so well and talked about some things then and how to do that. And I know that ended up being a really popular episode for us. I literally would be walking through Sam's Club and bump into somebody that was like, "Hey, I listened to the podcast. It was great." I'm like, thanks. And they're like, "Oh, Jamin was on there and I'm in his singles ministry." And I'm going, how cool is that? And so it was just really kind of just things there. I enjoyed Justin Nava a lot as a creative guy.
Twice. Had him on twice.
Yeah. And we had the one episode that, again, I know it's hard to struggle through. I think he kind of said the same thing in both times, but man, that first time and the second time, he kind of went on a little bit of a rant in both of those, in a good way, by the way, a rant. And he just gave some really, really good information in that. And then, I don't remember his name. I was just looking, trying to remember, and I'm terrible at this. Bruce, he was one of your students, and I believe he's in Florida very, very early, and he's doing like online kind of home church, like some things. And there was so many things I had questions about in that, but there was also some really encouraging things about, okay, it's important that we still continue online church and what we're doing there. And so there was some things, like I said, that was one where I'm not sure, like, hey, I'm not sure I fully understand or maybe even agree with everything that's going on, but it was really inspiring to me and challenged my brain. And so I've really enjoyed kind of from the beginning on, when I wasn't even a part of it, to now. It's been really fun.
Yeah, one of my favorites was Jim McLaren. I think he's the person you were talking about. And he's still working at planting that church in Florida, in Naples. Yes. And he learned everything about online just by teaching himself and getting good help. and he's a real gift in terms of helping people if they want to go online.
Yeah, we've had some great guests over the course of the last year, had some great discussions. But I think, if I'm being honest, my favorite episodes have been the ones where it's just the three of us sitting down talking through something. I feel like a lot of times when we have a guest, we have to really stick to an agenda. We stick to our script pretty well. And not that our show is completely scripted, but we do have an outline of what we want to do. We have different segments and different questions that we want to ask. And when we have a guest, we pretty well stick to those, because I send that to them about a week ahead of time, and a lot of them spend a lot of time preparing for that. And so we want to honor the work that they've put in and try to make sure that we get through as much of that as possible. And so they feel a little bit more scripted to me. Whereas when we have the episodes where it's just the three of us sitting down, I feel like our conversation becomes a little bit more organic. I feel like we feel a little looser, a little freer. And I think that some of our best discussions have been had during those times. And so I really do enjoy those episodes like this, where it's just the three of us sitting down and enjoying talking with each other. I know that those are the moments when I really walk away saying, wow, I really got a lot out of that discussion, a lot out of what was said. Is there a certain moment or memory over the course of the last year that really stands out to you guys?
I think there was this one time when you gave a real heartfelt intro and Bruce went, "Yep," and that really stands out. I mean, there's so many things that happen, like, behind the scenes. I think one of the things that kind of stands out to me, and I don't see all the metrics and stuff like that, and those, thankfully you care about that stuff and you help make those things go. The one thing that was interesting, kind of a moment, was the AI conversation that literally,
Wasn't supposed to happen.
Technology, ironically enough, did not allow us to do an episode, and we're sitting around and we're just talking, and I just randomly mentioned, like, yeah, I did this week with ChatGPT or something, and Bruce is like, I think you're speaking Greek, and like, it just led one thing to a next, and just a really, really, for me, that was a fun conversation, and I dove in a lot deeper after that, and I've learned some stuff, and that was just a fun, really kind of interesting thing that most people, I know we talked about it, but unless you were really there, you don't understand, like, the panic of, we need to do something worthwhile for an hour. And I feel like that was a really engaging conversation to challenge leaders inside of the church. What's your role and what's your process with AI? How do we
Speaking
engage
of
this?
technology, I think Bruce just dropped his microphone.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And that whole thing of, we talked about that day, the plow versus the tractor. I mean, you can continue dragging with a horse, dragging a plow, but at some point in time, people are going to buy tractors. And so how do you adapt to AI and what's going on in an effective and proper way without it replacing the Holy Spirit and what God's doing there? So
Yeah, I think that I don't know that we've told the story of what happened that day on air before. This was when we were recording at a local church before we moved our studio, and we had gotten there early. We'd set everything up. Everything was ready to go. We had a guest that was supposed to be with us that day from Washington, D.C. that I was really excited about. We got him on. We had our pre-show kind of meeting with him, talked through everything, and then we hit record, and there was nothing there. It wasn't picking up his microphone over there, and we messed around with it for probably
20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, 20, 30 minutes, and then we finally went with plan C. And then we were getting ready to hit record, and our guest said, I actually have to be in a meeting in 10 minutes. So if we can do this in 10 minutes, great. And we're like, we can't do this in 10 minutes. So we'd already been there for well over an hour trying to figure this out. And now our whole episode that we had prepped and prepared for was gone. We still haven't brought him back yet as a guest, haven't been able to work that out with his schedule. And so then we're sitting there. We've got the three of us sitting there at this church ready to go. All of our equipment set up. We have to have an episode to post in a few days on Tuesday. We're like, what do we do? And so you said, let me hop on ChatGPT here and see what Google has for us to figure out. And you came up with something using AI that I don't even remember what the topic was. And
I could go in and find it in my ChatGPT.
so we hit record, and in our intro, were talking about how you just used AI to generate an outline for an episode that we weren't planning on doing, and we never got to the outline of the episode because it just steamrolled into a conversation on AI that none of us had done any prep work on. None of us had done any research or prepared to talk on that at all. And it ended up being one of our most listened to episodes and talked about episodes with user comments and feedback. So that was a lot of fun.
The AI episode really was eye-opening to me. And that's the one of those I remember best. And I learned so much in that episode.
We had a lot of fun moments that our listeners would have no idea about, especially when we were at the old place where we would record, and we'd be sitting there recording, and all of a sudden a lawnmower would come zooming by, or someone would come walking into the church talking on their cell phone. And just sit right in front of us having a conversation on their phone, which I think was the catalyst, the final straw that we said we've got to move our studio somewhere else. And now things that, we've actually had several listeners ask if we were going to start videoing, showing the video of our podcast. And with this change from Anchor to Riverside, it's something that would be pretty easily doable. So something we may look into doing in the next few months. But some of my favorite moments are when Robert is in a deep moving segment, and he's given a monologue that is just moving, and then Lola the show dog comes walking in and just lays her head in his lap because she can tell the emotional anguish.
I need the support.
Yeah,
I need it. So yeah, that's definitely something that's funny to me too. And I always know people are very, very different and have unique personality traits, but the three of us carry a lot of very similar traits in how much we care about the local church, how much we care about communication, how much we really care about seeing pastors be healthy and succeed. But the way we go about that and the emotional side, the mental side of all of those things is very, very different. And I don't know that I know people can hear that in our voices, but it's definitely a space that we are all very, very unique with some of those things. And I don't know that people would actually realize how unique we are just in the conversations. I think they'd have to really get to know us more to realize, I kind of sit in my deep emotional rants a lot, and that's really where my happy space is. And that's not necessarily your and Bruce's favorite spot is a deep emotional rant. So
you could just ask my wife about that.
I know that one of the big differences between me and you, and your kids have said this too, is we were talking one day, and I was talking about, my whole house kind of, everybody has their own favorite sports team, and we just kind of go, and it is what it is and things. And I think your middle child, your middle daughter, or I guess second daughter, looked and said, that would be so refreshing. You're like, that's not allowed here. That's not allowed in our house. Everyone's a Dodgers fan. Everyone pulls for Southern Cal. It's all of these things that everybody's a UNLV fan with basketball. And so it was just funny to the differences of, we're both big sports fans, but I'm like, we pull for I have 5 people in my house. We pull for 4 different NFL teams out of the 5 people. And like, I think Kenna was just like, that would be so free. And then her story about how she picked her hockey team because you didn't really have a set hockey team yet or something. And
which right now, dating our time a little bit, although we gave you 1 year, that this is 1 year, that my Vegas Golden Knights are playing her Dallas Stars right now, and the Knights are up 1-0 right now as we're talking right now. It's a 1-0 series lead, so that's been a lot of fun in our home. Yep. Bruce, what are some of the lessons that you have learned personally over the course of the last year? Is there anything that personally you have taken away from the show that has grown you on an individual level?
That's hard to put a finger on. The episode with AI is one of the things that really flabbergasted me. And I'm still studying what it is and how it's used. And Robert, I have found there are some positive usages based upon our conversations. But other than I like listening to you and Robert, and I like to hear some of the ideas that come out of that.
I think
But
that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bruce. You can finish up there.
I'm still trying to understand myself talking back to myself here on the podcast today.
Yeah, I think that one of the like what Bruce said there has probably been the biggest thing that I've learned this year is that there's really something redeemable in just about everything. I don't overly love technology. I had some conversations even this week, just processing through again at 48 years old and work. I remember phones when you were very much hooked to a room. I remember when the cords got a little bit longer. I remember when the first like cordless phones came out, but if you were on the other side of the same room, it started to break up.
Yeah.
And then the other day, I was talking to friends or my mom or somebody like that are hours from me, and I'm driving 65 mile an hour down the interstate with AirPods in and my phone's working and I'm having crystal clear communication. And so that to me, with the fact that my mom doesn't live in the same neighborhood as me, that I don't get to see her every day, that's a real redeemable part. I've got a kid who's about to go spend the summer in Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. And that's a real redeemable thing that we'll be able to FaceTime each other and to talk and to do. So in all the negative, and I appreciate what Bruce said there about AI, in all the negative of AI or inside of technology or inside of so many things, there are some redeemable pieces. This podcast, I believe, is a redeemable thing inside of technology. I believe their AI has some really good things that we can learn from. And so I think that part of what Bruce said is the most, and that goes back to the church planning thing we were talking about earlier and the things that have impacted me, whether it was a tension I'm trying to figure out or whether it was a real encouragement in something that I'm doing or some help in an area that I'm struggling. Just being able to understand that each area of life, whether it deals with technology, relationships, whatever it is, has a really good space inside of it, and it's all not bad, and I need to be able to figure out how to do that. So what about you? Because you do the vast majority of the work for this thing. Like, we all talk about some ideas, but you take those, sift through them, throw the junk away, get the good stuff in. I mean, you do a lot of the work on this. So what's kind of been your thing, the lessons learned this year?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been a huge growth experience in the technical side of things. We've had a couple of times where we've spent hours upon hours upon hours in the pre-recording phase, setting things up, then an hour or so recording. One of the episodes was a double episode, and then I get home to start the long, tedious task of the post-recording, and there's nothing there. That everything that we've done is gone. And when it's just with us, that's something that I can call you guys and say, hey, we've got to redo this. We've got nothing. But when it's with a guest that you've spent time in a pre-interview phase, some of these guests I've been working with for 2 months, before they come on air, and having several conversations with them beforehand, and then to go back and say, we have nothing out of that. The first time that happened with Justin Nava was pretty disheartening. And you actually said to me, well, are you not recording it on the Rodecaster? I'm like, what do you mean? And you said, look, and you hit the button and started recording. Like, I didn't know I could do that. And so there's been a lot of technological growth that I've seen. But for me, the biggest thing it's been very humbling, the fact that we don't get paid to do this. And you and Bruce sacrifice time every single week to come in and sit down and do this and take time away from your busy schedules, away from your families, away from your church obligations to come and do this. And a lot of times there's a lot of work that goes into it that, much like I think a pastor in church, You wonder, is anybody getting anything out of this? And I can remember Sunday afternoons being really difficult and thinking the 30 hours that I spent on that message, all the time that I put into this, did anybody get anything out of this? And so it's those moments when you're walking through a store and someone says, "Hey, heard you on the podcast," and or when I'm sitting down with a pastor that says, "Oh, I loved what was said last week on the podcast." I'm like, "You actually listened to it?" And like, "Oh yeah, I listen to it every week." And sure, I can see the numbers. I check the numbers maybe once a month or so. Not as much as I did early on. Early on, I was checking it almost daily, and now sometimes I'll go weeks without checking it. And so I see the numbers, but I think in my mind, those numbers are pretty arbitrary. It's like, well, I'm sure all those people are over in England or somewhere. They don't know who we are. And so when you get the email message from someone saying what you guys discussed really impacted me, or you're having the conversation where someone says, "Hey, I was listening to your show the other day and really loved what was said," it's validating and humbling to hear that what we're doing, what we've devoted countless hours to over the course of the last year, is reaching people, and it is hopefully being an encouragement and a resource to small church pastors, which is why we started this whole thing, was to be a resource and an encouragement to small church pastors.
So in that vein, not just to keep you talking, but you always share some of these things with Bruce and me, but what's been some of the, what's been some moments that, like, inside of that listener engagement and impact and kind of their feedback and what's been said from the men and women that are taking time out of their weeks, that, when they're stocking shelves or they're driving down the road or they're mowing their yard or whatever it is they're doing. If they're like me, trying to drown out crying kids sometimes with podcasts years ago. I didn't do that, by the way, but maybe I would have if podcasts would have been around. What's some things that you've gotten and heard that have just been really encouraging, that's kind of inspired to kind of keep this thing going?
One that I got, probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, from a guy that I used to meet with almost weekly. A local pastor here in our area that I used to meet with almost weekly. Hadn't met with him in a long time, and reached back out to him as he's going through some personal things that I had found out about, and so reached back out to him to just say, "Hey, let's connect." And we had some conversations through text and phone. Hadn't had the chance to sit down with him personally yet, but in our conversation on text and phone, he talked about how our show has gotten him through some really difficult times personally and professionally over the course of the last several months. And I said, "Oh, you listened to our show. How did you find out about it?" And I don't remember what he said about how he found out about it, but he said, "Oh yeah, I don't miss an episode. You guys are like family."
That's awesome.
And what clicked for me with his statement there is that I think we've talked about this on the show before, is that I am a huge Dan Patrick fan. And Dan Patrick and the Danettes, the Dan Patrick Show is on Monday through Friday from 9 to 12. I have sitting right behind you over there an autographed thing that my wife got me for Christmas that's autographed by Dan and all the Danettes. It's a sports show. It's a sports radio show that is also a podcast, 3 hours, 5 days a week. And those guys feel like family to me. I've never met them, never had a conversation. I've never called into their show. But yet I feel like I know them, and they feel it's comforting to me listening to them. And so when he said, "Oh yeah, I never miss an episode. You guys feel like family to me," it triggered that for me to say, how cool is that we can be that space? And I know how lonely ministry can be, especially small church ministry, especially where this guy has been, that, single staff, only person there, leadership not very involved, really struggling with personal and professional growth and development over the course of several years, and just very lonely and isolated. To think that we can be filling that role to bring some sort of community, some sort of camaraderie, some sort of connection. I just use 3 C's right there. You can use that in a sermon sometime.
Alliterate that stuff, man.
That's
Let's
right.
go.
really, I got off the phone with him that day and was really, really floored at that one comment that he made, and how much that meant to me personally, that we're able to fill that space in at least one person's life, hopefully a lot more.
We'd be nowhere near where we are without Tony. Tony has done an excellent job.
Well, I
We've
think we'd be
gotten
nowhere
people-
near where we are without any of us. I think that the dynamic that we bring together is what creates such an engaging and hopefully important ministry. I'm going to go ahead and say ministry. I know we're just a podcast, we're just a show, but I feel like what we do and the response that we get from people, that it is a ministry. It is reaching people.
No, absolutely. So in that, and I mean, I think there's probably going to be a little bit of just some thoughts here and things as well. But I know that Tony, you'll have a little more clarity. So we've done this for 12 months. I know we've got a couple part episode that's going to be coming up. So month 13 is going to be starting, and so we're not going away, and this, we don't see any shutting it down anytime soon. So kind of in your heart and mind, and as you're trusting, because I mean, there really is. There's a huge level of we're trusting the Holy Spirit's leading of just, how long do you continue these types of things? What do we talk about each week and all those things? What's kind of some goals and some things that you're seeing for the next year? Now that made it, see, there's Robert taking something that should have been a fun, like, what's super exciting that we're going to do next year, going, Tony, inside of the deep emotional feelings that we have, I want to be sure and get, we're not just randomly pulling this out of the air.
We've got some guests that we have had that have committed to being on the show for months now, that it's just been scheduling issues. We haven't been able to get them on. And we've got 5-6 guests that are committed to coming on the show that I'm so excited about.
That's awesome.
That are going to be really, really fun to sit down with. We've also talked amongst ourselves about, we're 52, 53, 54 episodes into this thing, as we've pre-recorded some episodes that will be coming out in the future. And so we're several episodes into this thing. And at some point, it's like, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to say? And so we've vaguely tossed around a little bit of doing some like mini series within the show that I'm excited of exploring. I think that we're all committed to keeping doing this and doing things that are continuing to be an encouragement and a resource for small church leaders. So some great guests that we have upcoming, some great topics that we're going to dive into, and maybe some things a little bit different from what we've typically done over the course of the last year, to kind of branch into some different subject matters and maybe even genres, if you could go so far as to say. And so I think that there's big things, and maybe even adding, as we talked about before, the video feature, so you guys can see our beautiful faces and not just hear our voices.
Yeah, and I think you even mentioned in episode 50, I think we talked about it in episode 51 as we were going through justice and, what does that look like in our world, and what are the social topics, how do you teach and preach from those that we're facing politically, socially inside of our society today. And there was a conversation around, hey, what if we took, because I mean, it was literally a Google search, but hey, here's like 17 things. And you were like, man, what, maybe we take 4 or 5 of those and kind of do some deeper dives. And so, I think there's some really fun things on the horizon, and I'm always a fan of guests. And I know we're working on a few others inside of different areas of ministry that can help with kind of the full gambit, because we do understand, because I am, and Bruce and Tony have been in small church ministry, and we know how hard it is when you're the pastor, the bookkeeper, the coffee maker, the maintenance guy, the yard guy. I mean, when you are you're the lady that has to do every little thing that goes on. You're the janitor, you're the children's ministry, the student ministry, the worship leader, the tech person. When you're the man and woman that's carrying 10, 12, 15 hats. And so I know we want to meet really a holistic view of the physical, the grind jobs, as well as the spiritual parts of what that looks like for each of the people who are listening as they're navigating ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, guys, it's been 1 year.
Whoa.
1 year. There's much more to come. Bigger, better things still to come. Excited for the future of the show. Bruce, you have any last final thoughts as we wrap this,
As you're
this
the one-
anniversary episode?
As he's the one who's smarter than both of us.
Having me saying that I have any thoughts at all, it's an amazing. I was just thinking maybe to end it with an illustration. Years ago, I had a friend in a small church, and he was also a volunteer firefighter. He came to church one night late because there's a fire, and the lights were not turned on, but all the people were there. And he asked them why they didn't turn the lights on. They said, "Well, we thought you'd like doing it." So sometimes you got that really important thing when you're a minister, turn the lights on.
Great thought. Great way to end this show. And so we, once again, we want to thank you for the last year, all of your support, all of your encouragement, all of your thoughts. And we want to especially thank Dr. Bruce Montgomery, Robert Kell for their integral part of the Small Church Podcast. But none of this would be possible without you, our listeners. So keep listening, subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Share it with your friends. If you have other small church pastors or leaders that you think could benefit from our conversations, if you have a topic that you would like for us to discuss or a guest that you think would be great for us here on the Small Church Podcast, you can reach out to us at higherministries.com or find us on Facebook at Higher Ministries. Like, subscribe, and tune in. Bigger and better things here to come. We want to thank you for the last 52 weeks, and we look forward to countless more weeks here on the Small Church Podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to talking to you next week.